He'll never take credit for a lot of my sobriety and my recovery, but I guarantee it, I wouldn't be alive without him today.
In 2015, Demi Lovato told the world she wouldn't be alive without the man who'd been in her life since she was 17. He was her rock and her savior. But by 2026, she went on Keke Palmer's podcast asking a very different question.
I'm 15. Why is my boyfriend 20?
Why was my boyfriend 30?
It was the most direct thing she'd ever said about him. And it reframed a decade-long love story into something the public is catching up on. Because Demi wasn't the first teenager this man pursued. She was the third. Mandy Moore was 15. Lindsay Lohan was 17. And every single relationship went public only after the girls turned 18. To understand the playbook, we need to start with the man who ran it.
You know, you come to this country with the thought that anything is possible.
Yeah.
And then it is. But you know, it is individuals like him that say, you can do it. And then all of a sudden you start thinking, oh, maybe I can do it, you know, maybe.
Wilmer Valderrama was born in Miami, raised in Venezuela, and moved back to the States as a teenager. He was cast on That 70s Show at 18 and became famous by 20. The show didn't make him A-list, but it gave him something more useful, a permanent seat in young Hollywood circles as the charming, slightly older guy who'd already made it. Never the biggest name at any party, but always the most experienced one in the room. And this was in the early 2000s, when teen pop stars were everywhere, age gaps barely registering as gossip, and no public language for questioning why a 20-year-old sitcom actor was spending time with underage girls. So when his first girlfriend after fame turned out to be a teenage pop star at the peak of her visibility, nobody stopped it.
My first real true boyfriend.
Right.
Mandy Moore was only 15 when she met Valderrama at a teen magazine photo shoot. She later told Howard Stern she'd never even French kissed a boy.
I met him at a photo shoot for like some teen magazine, literally, when I was 15.
And you were pretty innocent.
I was, again,
Yeah.
like never French kissed a boy.
He was 20 and they started dating when she turned 16. And that detail, the photo shoot, matters. Because Wilmer didn't meet these girls at clubs or through mutual adult friends. He met them through industry events built around young talent. Photo shoots, PSA campaigns, sets. Spaces where a slightly older TV star had a natural reason to show up, and where a teenage girl would see him as part of her professional world, rather than a stranger approaching her out of nowhere. But access alone doesn't explain the pattern. It's who he chose once he had it. Moore wasn't just young. She was navigating her very first relationship with zero frame of reference, no previous boyfriend, no experience to measure the dynamic against, and no adults in her professional circle raising concerns about a 20-year-old man dating a 16-year-old girl. So the relationship lasted about 2 years, ended quietly, and nobody questioned the ages. In the tabloid math of that era, a 4-year gap barely counted. But Moore was only the first, and the next girl was younger relative to his age, more famous, and even less protected. Lindsay Lohan was 17 when she was first spotted with Valderrama in May of 2004, while he was 24. However, her age was only part of the picture because she was in the middle of the most chaotic rise in young Hollywood, becoming the most photographed teenager in the world, with a fame machine spinning faster than anyone around her could manage. Her mother called Valderrama her daughter's first love. They split months later, and Lohan wrote a song about him the day after the breakup while still living in the same house. Then came Demi Lovato, 17 years old, walking into a Voto Latino PSA shoot on January 11, 2010. But this time, the shoot was held at Valderrama's house. He was already 29, and once again, her age was the least of what made her vulnerable, because she was battling bulimia, self-harm, and undiagnosed bipolar disorder, months away from a very public breakdown and her first rehab stay. The math tells its own story. The age gap tripled across a decade. 4 years with Moore, 6.5 with Lohan, 12.5 with Lovato. And the settings got more private each time. A teen magazine photo shoot, then young Hollywood social circles, then a shoot inside his own house. But the girls? They stayed the same age, and every single one was at the most exposed, least protected moment of her life. So he didn't just find young girls, he found the ones who were already overwhelmed, who would see an older established man as stability rather than a red flag. But finding them was only the first step, because what he did next, the same move, every single time, is what turns a coincidence into a pattern.
"Oh my God, you're so attractive." And he was like, "You are not 18, get away from me."
Now here's the detail that ties all three relationships together. Every single one went public only after the girls turned 18. Moore, Lohan, Lovato. 3 relationships across 10 years. But in every case, the first tabloid photos or public acknowledgement appeared only after their 18th birthday. With Lovato, the timing was even narrated as a love story. She told the version herself in her 2017 documentary, Simply Complicated.
But when I met him and I laid eyes on him for the first time, I was in hair and makeup and he came and sat down and I was like, I love this man and I have to have him.
When they first met, he turned her away at 17 and told her to come back when she was older. Then they began officially dating after she turned 18. For years, that story was treated as proof of Valderrama's character, that he could have taken advantage, but he didn't. He waited. But think about what that actually means. If a 29-year-old meets a 17-year-old at a shoot held in his own home and his response is come back when you're 18, that's not restraint. That's a timeline. With Lohan, the relationship was invisible to tabloids until July 2004, the exact month she turned 18. With Moore, their ages were barely discussed publicly, but with Lovato, the "he saved my life" narrative became so dominant that questioning the age gap felt like questioning her recovery. The public version of each relationship was carefully managed, and for more than a decade, that managed version held, until Valderrama himself blew it up on national radio.
Who I think is a real hot piece of ass. You dated Mandy Moore.
Yeah.
For
You
2
f***ed Mandy Moore.
What's that like? Jesus.
In 2006, years before the Lovato relationship even began, he sat down on Howard Stern's show and told a very different version of these love stories. On air, he claimed he'd taken Mandy Moore's virginity, comparing the experience to a scene from American Pie. He shared graphic details about Lindsay Lohan's body, rated ex-girlfriends on a numerical scale, and treated private moments with girls he'd dated as teenagers like punchlines. All of it voluntary, all of it laughing. Moore responded at the time in Elle, calling his claims utterly tacky and not even true. 12 years later, she returned to Stern's own show with a more direct account. She'd confronted Valderrama after the original interview, and when he tried to say he'd merely insinuated things, she shut it down. "No, you outright said it."
I took Mandy Moore's virginity. Were you beside yourself?
Yes.
And you were hurt.
Very.
Do you pick up the phone and call him and say, "Hey,
Yes.
asshole"?
Yeah.
First of all, you didn't take my virginity.
Yeah.
So there were always 2 versions of these relationships. The love story the public saw and the conquest list he broadcast on Howard Stern when he thought it made him look impressive. Nobody in the industry ever treated those 2 versions as contradictory. But the worst part wasn't how he found them or how he timed it. It's what he did inside the Lovato relationship. That made Demi spend 6 years defending the man she'd eventually call out in front of the entire internet.
I've never loved anybody like I loved Wilmer. And like I still love Wilmer.
With Moore and Lohan, the relationships were brief. Find them young, go public after 18, move on. But with Lovato, the dynamic shifted into something deeper and far harder to question: dependency. Lovato was 17 when Valderrama came into her life, already battling more than anyone around her knew. Within months of them officially being together, she had a public breakdown, entered rehab, and was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
When I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, it just made sense.
And through every crisis over the next 6 years, Valderrama positioned himself as the one person holding her together. He flew red-eye flights to visit her in rehab on weekends. He showed up at hospitals. He sat with her through diagnoses that would have overwhelmed anyone, let alone a teenager navigating all of it under a spotlight. And in return, she credited him publicly and repeatedly. On Instagram, she wrote, "I really wouldn't be alive today without him." The same words she'd repeat in interview after interview for years, which meant he wasn't framed as her boyfriend anymore. He was framed as the reason she survived. And that's what made this layer so much harder to see than the others. With Moore and Lohan, the pattern was external: ages, timelines, access points that anyone could verify. But with Lovato, the control was emotional. He didn't just date a vulnerable teenager, he became the infrastructure of her recovery. And once that framing took hold, questioning the relationship didn't just feel uncomfortable, it felt dangerous, like pulling a support beam out of someone's life while they were still standing on it. For 6 years, the savior narrative held, even after their breakup in June of 2016, announced through a joint statement about being better as best friends.
We connected on a level that I've never connected with anybody before. He was just my rock, my everything.
She called him my rock, my everything in her 2017 documentary, even after she was hospitalized following a substance-related emergency in July of 2018. Valderrama was reportedly the first person at her bedside. The narrative survived the relationship itself. It only broke when Lovato reached the age Wilmer was when they met. She turned 29 in 2021, and something shifted. She later told Apple Music, "I'm 29 now," and it put things into perspective. That perspective became a song, 29, released in August of 2022, which named the age gap questioned consent and called him a collector.
And just really excited about it and wanted my fans to hear it. And now it's out and they get to hear it and play it and share it and do all the things with it. So yeah. I'm excited.
The track went viral on TikTok with thousands of users sharing their own experiences of older men pursuing them as teenagers. 16 years after Moore was 15 at that photo shoot, the word grooming, used colloquially rather than legally, finally entered the conversation around Valderrama, and Lovato kept going. By 2023, she told Howard Stern, "I look back on the past and think that's gross." Then by March of 2026, she sat across from Keke Palmer and asked the question that opened this video. Meanwhile, Valderrama's response to the song, the interviews, the entire cultural shift, total silence. Instagram comments turned off after 29 dropped, a 2024 memoir that deliberately omitted every past relationship, a representative who declined to comment. And through all of it, the industry that watched this pattern unfold for 2 decades hasn't missed a beat either. He's still a series regular on NCIS, still voicing Disney characters, still earning a reported $100,000 per episode on one of the most watched shows on television. No network has distanced itself, no casting director has hesitated, and the conversation that exploded across TikTok think pieces and podcasts exists in a completely different universe than the one where his career operates.
I'm not completely healed. We obviously all have work to still do on ourselves, but I'm at a place in my life where I can sit back and enjoy the fruits of my, emotional and therapeutic labor.
Wilmer Valderrama didn't stumble into relationships with 3 teenage girls across a decade. He found them through industry events. He kept each one private until they turned 18. And with the one who stayed the longest, he built a dependency so deep that the age gap disappeared behind the love story. When Demi Lovato sat across from Keke Palmer and asked, "Why was my boyfriend 30?" she was naming what this actually was. Not a love story, but a system. Access, timing, dependency. The same playbook 3 times in a row. And the only thing that broke it was the women getting old enough to see it for what it was. Was this a pattern you noticed at the time, or did it only become visible in hindsight? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.